Hey guys, tonight we travel to an island where the birds don't sing, they stomp. You're deep in Madagascar, sometime long before cars, cell phones, or cities. The only thing louder than the wind in the baobab trees is the thunder of giant, flightless birds as tall as your basketball hoop. Their heads bob above the brush. Their eyes blink slowly like they have nowhere to be ever. They're so big if one sneezes near you, you might just end up in a different timeline. You take a cautious step forward. The ground is soft beneath your bare feet, thick with fallen leaves and the scent of wet earth. Around you, vines twist like lazy snakes and strange calls echo from creatures you don't recognize. It's not quite a jungle, not quite a savanna, just uniquely, undeniably Madagascar. And towering above it all, a shape moves in the mist. A mountain with legs. It takes another step. Thump. You squint. It's covered in thick brownish-black feathers. Its legs look like tree trunks. That's not a dinosaur. That's a bird. An elephant bird. Welcome to a world where you're not the biggest thing in the forest. Not even close. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far our sleepy little history club reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The elephant bird doesn't even look at you. It plods past, too heavy to care about your tiny human drama. You stare at it slack-jawed. This thing is real. At least for now. And it's not alone. There are more behind it. 1, 2, 3. A small flock. Or maybe a family. Their calls are low rumbles, like a bass drum, played 3 valleys away. You feel it in your chest. Madagascar is a strange place. Cut off from the rest of the world for over 80 million years, this island is like nature's weird side project. Giant chameleons, lemurs that sing in chorus, trees that look like upside-down umbrellas, and smack in the middle of it all, Epiornis maximus, the biggest bird that ever lived. Some say it could grow up to 10 feet tall and weigh over 1,600 pounds. That's more than a vending machine with feathers. You duck under a low-hanging branch and follow at a distance, keeping your steps light. These birds may be slow, but they're not stupid. And you're not exactly invisible either. Your heart is pounding, but your curiosity is louder. You're seeing a creature that modern humans will only know from museums. A walking relic. A prehistoric ghost still breathing. There's a rustle beside you. A lemur, wide-eyed and fluffy-tailed, leaps to another branch like it's late for a meeting. The elephant bird glances over, just once, then back to grazing. Its long, powerful beak digs into the earth, pulling up roots and tubers like a living backhoe. You inch closer. The ground dips here, and you almost stumble. Then you see it, a massive cream-colored oval, half buried in the earth. It's an egg. Not just an egg. This thing could crush. A watermelon without trying. Bigger than your head, wider than a dinner plate, heavier than a bowling ball. Elephant bird eggs were the size of a small beach ball and could hold over 2 gallons of yolk. That's roughly 160 chicken eggs, by the way. Breakfast for a whole village, or a very irresponsible brunch. You want to touch it, but something stops you. Maybe it's the way the mother bird watches out of the corner of her eye. Or maybe it's the way the air feels here, like it's holding its breath. This place is old and fragile. You're not supposed to be here. Historians still argue whether humans ever saw a live elephant bird. Some say they vanished before people arrived. Others insist the first settlers would have walked alongside them, probably carefully. probably with a spear in hand and one foot halfway out the door. After all, if an animal lays eggs this big and slow, it's basically ringing the dinner bell. But for now, in this moment, the birds are still alive. You watch as one settles down near a tree, folding its giant legs beneath its feathery bulk. With surprising grace, it blinks slowly. You blink back. There's a strange peace in this world. No cars, no phones, no influencers, hawking mushroom lattes. Just the wind, the insects, and the occasional thump of an elephant bird taking another step. You wonder what it would have felt like to grow up here, to think this was normal. Giant birds strutting past your hut like it's Tuesday. Your kids learning to avoid the eggs unless they want a very upset mom chasing them across the jungle. Maybe they told stories about these birds. Maybe they believed they were spirits or gods, or just really stubborn chickens. Who knows? That's the thing about history. It doesn't come with a playbook, just clues, hints, bones in the ground, shell fragments in a cave, myths passed down by firelight, and you piecing it all together from a world long gone. The elephant bird stretches its neck and lets out a low sound, part moan, part growl, part foghorn. You freeze. Then it goes back to chewing on something leafy. False alarm. But still, time to back up. As you step away, you notice the footprints. Huge, round, deep. Like someone punched the earth with a frying pan. They lead away into the brush, disappearing into the trees. You wonder how many more are out there, hidden in the foliage. How long they'll last. Or whether anyone else will ever see one again. Spoiler, they won't. But you're not ready to say goodbye just yet. You keep your distance, your footsteps, light on the damp leaf litter, but your eyes are locked on the creature ahead. The elephant bird, Apiornis maximus, moves like a giant in slow motion. Each step lands with a deliberate thud, and its head bobs forward with a strangely rhythmic sway, as if it's listening to music only birds can hear. You stare up at it again, really look, and wonder how on earth something this massive was even called a bird. Because let's be real, this is the bird equivalent of a sumo wrestler with feathers. It doesn't fly. It barely jumps. Its wings are so tiny they're practically accessories. It's like nature just gave up halfway and said, "Hey, you're better off on the ground." This thing is absurd. It towers over you taller than any ostrich with legs like tree trunks and a neck long enough to steal apples from high branches. If you squint, it could almost be a dinosaur. And technically, it sort of is. Birds are dinosaurs after all. Distant cousins of the velociraptor, though this one looks more like the velociraptor's gentle great aunt, who hosts awkward tea parties and never gets off the couch. You find yourself wondering how much it weighs. The best guess is somewhere between 1,000 and 1,600 pounds. That's more than your average cow. It's heavy enough to flatten bushes just by sitting down. And when it does sit, it does so slowly, carefully, like it knows the earth has feelings too. Historians still argue whether it was the biggest bird ever. Some vote for Borombe Titan, a recently discovered close cousin, which might have been even larger. It's like a game of prehistoric one-upmanship. Oh, you thought that bird was big, hold my fern. You notice the bird's feathers now thick and dark, more like hair than anything sleek, perfect for camouflage in the dense underbrush. And the legs covered in scaly skin, with 3 forward-facing toes that end in dull, blunt claws. This bird isn't built for battle. It's built to move slow, eat roots, and not get eaten. Simple life goals. But here's the strange thing. For all its size, it's not scary. Not really. It's calm, lumbering, a little dopey looking. Its eyes, small and dark, scan the trees with a kind of resigned patience, like it's seen it all before and isn't impressed. It snorts quietly as it pushes its beak into the soil, yanking out a tuber the size of a small football. Dinner, apparently. There's something serene about watching it feed. No rush, no competition, no predators in sight. This island once upon a time was a paradise for creatures like this. No tigers, no wolves, not even monkeys. Just lemurs, birds, reptiles, and lots of plants. That's what made Madagascar so special and so weird. Because this bird, it evolved here on this floating puzzle piece of a continent after Madagascar broke away from Africa millions of years ago. Think of it like the world's longest solo road trip. No bridges, no tunnels, just isolation. Which meant nature had a field day inventing strange new species without anyone around to interrupt. With no large predators around, the elephant bird didn't need to run fast or fly away. It just needed to be big enough to not get messed with. And that worked for a while. There's a branch cracking overhead, and your gaze shoots up. A brown lemur stares down at you upside down, chewing on something sticky. You lock eyes for a second before it darts away like a nervous little shadow. The elephant bird doesn't even blink. You can't help but smile. For a creature that can't fly, the elephant bird seems, surprisingly, bird-like. It pecks, it plods, it blinks sideways, all very avian, just on a scale that would give most airport baggage handlers a nervous breakdown. You step back a bit and find yourself staring at a group of them now. A small cluster, maybe a family, grazing together near a clearing. The youngest one isn't that small, still taller than a golden retriever, still hefty enough to knock you over without trying. It mimics its parent jabbing at the ground but only digs up dirt and disappointment. They move together like clouds, slow, steady, and oblivious to time. And in that moment, you kind of envy them. No emails, no taxes, no existential dread. Just dirt, sun, and the occasional patch of delicious ferns. But there's another side to their story, a quieter one. The elephant bird's incredible size was a double-edged sword. Sure, it kept them safe, but it also made them vulnerable. They needed lots of food. They reproduced slowly. And their eggs, huge, yes, but also brittle. Easy to break, easy to steal. Especially if you're a clever, egg-hungry human with a stick. Still, right now, in this moment, the elephant birds are thriving. You sit on a rock watching them waddle through the underbrush like mobile boulders. You feel the earth thump gently with every step. You hear the wind rustle through feathered backs. You breathe in the scent of loam fern and old history. And then one of them sneezes, loudly. You duck instinctively, not because it's dangerous, just startling. The bird shakes its head and snorts, looking mildly offended. You almost apologize out loud. Okay, maybe it is a little scary. You slowly rise and begin to move again, careful not to disturb them. The sun is setting now, casting long shadows between the trees. The birds don't seem to care. Sunset means nothing when your schedule is eat, walk, nap, repeat. You glance up at the sky, painted in fading oranges and purples, and realize something. You're watching one of the last giants to ever roam the earth, and they don't even know it. Not yet. You follow the herd, if that's what you'd even call a casual squad of bird behemoths, as they move toward a clearing. The ground flattens, the trees thin out, and suddenly the smell hits you. It's warm, rich, a little funky, like wet hay, and something else. And then you see it. An egg. Not just an egg. The egg. It's lying in a shallow pit of packed soil. almost like a makeshift nest, cradled between tufts of grass and scattered leaves. You kneel beside it, careful not to touch, because let's face it, you've seen Jurassic Park. This thing is almost comically huge. If you held a basketball in each hand and stacked them, you'd still come up short. This egg is roughly a foot long with a shell that's chalky and slightly dimpled like an old porcelain vase. You circle it slowly, quietly, like it's going to explode or hatch or do something dramatic. But no, it just sits there, silent, ancient, heavy with promise. You could scramble it and feed an entire village. And in fact, people probably did. See, this is where the elephant bird story starts getting messy. These eggs were massive, up to 9 liters of yolk inside. That's over 150 chicken eggs. Crack one open and you've got yourself a prehistoric omelette buffet. A single family could feast for days. There are even legends, particularly among the Malagasy people, of giant eggs, traded, stolen, or fought over. You almost can't blame them. When food is scarce and you stumble on a protein-packed miracle, dropped gently in the dirt by a bird, too slow to stop you, well, let's just say the temptation is real. Historians still argue whether humans hunted elephant birds to extinction or simply over-harvested their eggs. The birds didn't exactly scream, "Run for your life," after all. More like, "I'm gonna walk over here for the next hour and hope for the best." And it gets worse, because these eggs, they weren't hidden in safe places. Elephant birds laid them on open ground, maybe not in big communal nests, like some dinosaurs, but still in spots that made them easy targets. No camouflage, no protective parenting. It was the prehistoric version of leaving your car unlocked with the engine running. You sit beside the egg and imagine the scene centuries ago. A group of early settlers, creeping through the trees, eyes wide. They spot a nest like this. They whisper, plan, tiptoe closer. No spears, no drama. Just a quick snatch and retreat. And breakfast is served. But even one egg stolen meant one less elephant bird. These creatures laid eggs, slowly, maybe just 1 or 2 per year. So every missing egg wasn't just a snack. It was a stolen future. A silenced lineage. You reach out and hover your hand, just above the shell, not quite touching. It's cool in the shade, surprisingly smooth. Somewhere inside, in a time long before you, a chick once floated here, fat and fluffy, dreaming in the dark. A life paused before it even began. You hear a shuffle behind you and turn. Just in time to see the mother. At least you think it's the mother lumbering back toward the nest. She's enormous even by elephant bird standards. Her chest feathers are fluffed out like she's been pacing nervous. Her long neck cranes low as she approaches, scanning for threats. You hold your breath. She lets out a low whoom, somewhere between a hoot and a grunt, and settles over the nest, tucking her body around the egg with deliberate, careful grace. For something that looks like it could topple a car, she's remarkably gentle. You back away slowly, not wanting to disturb her. There's something sacred about it. This quiet ritual of warmth, wait, and waiting. You imagine what hatching must have looked like. A tiny beak, well, okay, relatively. Tiny tapping from inside. Cracks spidering across the shell. A wet, awkward fluff ball wobbling into the world, blinking up at a mother who won't coo or cuddle, but will at least stick around for a bit before waddling off to find breakfast. Did elephant birds parent their chicks? Or did they just lay and leave like many modern birds? Historians still argue over that too. There's not enough fossil evidence to say for sure. Some believe the chicks had to fend for themselves, from day one relying on instinct and luck. Others think the massive mothers may have lingered for a while, guarding their fragile offspring from giant lemurs or curious humans. You wander farther into the clearing now, careful to step around other possible nests. The ground is bumpy with shallow depressions, empty cradles, maybe once filled with eggs, maybe not. You picture an entire field of them, glowing softly under a Madagascar moon, watched over by shaggy giants with sleepy eyes. It's beautiful in a bittersweet way. You pause by a broken shell, scattered fragments, pale and sharp-edged, half buried in dirt. You crouch down. Each piece is thicker than a chicken eggshell, but it still looks like it could have cracked from a careless step. Maybe it hatched. Maybe it didn't. Maybe someone couldn't resist an omelet. That's the strange tragedy of the elephant bird. They were too perfect, too big, too slow, too generous with their eggs. Madagascar gave them a safe island to thrive. But the moment humans showed up, that safety vanished. And yet, you don't feel anger. Not really. Just a kind of quiet sadness. The kind that comes from realizing something magnificent existed and didn't make it. You glance back at the nesting mother one last time. She hasn't moved, just a dark round shape in the fading light, guarding a dream that may or may not come true. You stand, stretch, and turn toward the edge of the forest. There's more to see, more to uncover. But you carry the shape of that egg with you, like a secret in your pocket, the size of your head filled with the memory of a world too gentle to last. You drift deeper into the forest, the light thinning into soft green shadows. The chirps and caws of smaller birds ring through the canopy, but they seem like whispers next to the memory of that silent colossus nesting over her egg. Now let's pull the curtain back a little further. You pass a narrow stream barely ankle deep and hop over it in a single step. The air here feels thicker, like it remembers things. And somewhere nearby, not far at all, a tree leans slightly sideways, its bark etched with strange patterns. Not carvings, scratches. Massive, accidental, almost bored-looking marks. You run your hand over them. Yeah, something big passed here. And here's the twist. Elephant birds weren't the only ones stomping around Madagascar. Nope. The island was, and still is, a living laboratory of oddities. The kind of place where evolution throws its hands up and says, "You know what? Let's get weird." Back then, elephant birds had neighbors. Lemurs as big as gorillas. Carnivorous ducks. Giant fossil-like predators with too many teeth and way too much confidence. Madagascar was practically a nature documentary gone off script. And yet somehow the elephant birds didn't seem fazed. They were like that gentle, overly tall friend at school who just wants to vibe and snack. Scientists believed they were herbivores, big fruit eaters, plant munchers, maybe the occasional digger of roots. Their beaks were strong but not sharp, better suited for plucking than piercing. But you can't help wondering, did they have any predators? Historians still argue about that one. Some point to the giant fossa as a real threat, sleek, agile, and hungry for anything slower than a tree sloth. Others think the bird's sheer size kept them safe. Until humans arrived, of course. Then it wasn't about fangs or claws. It was about fire traps and, over time, something far more dangerous: curiosity. Because you know what happens when humans get curious. We explore, we poke things, we build stories. And when those stories involve giant eggs and towering birds, they travel fast. You keep walking. The trees open into a mossy slope, and you catch a glimpse of something ahead. A ring of smooth stones, half sunk into the earth. You step inside. It's a campsite, or it was. Long ago. The fire pit still holds blackened ash. Bones lie scattered, some cracked open, some neatly stacked. And then you spotted a fragment of eggshell. You kneel, fingers brushing dirt away. It's thicker than the others, decorated with tiny scorch marks. Somebody cooked this. And suddenly, you're not alone in your imagination anymore. You see the firelight dancing on someone's face. Hear the low murmur of old Malagasy dialects. Watch a pair of hands turning a thick slab of egg on a flat stone. Maybe sprinkling herbs. Maybe just listening to it sizzle. You've stepped into a dinner party 10 centuries gone. There's a theory, and it's debated, of course, that early Malagasy people practiced ritual sharing of elephant bird eggs. Not just food, ceremony, community. A chance to sit beneath the stars and crack open something ancient like eating time itself. You sit on a log nearby. It creaks under your weight but holds. The night air cools your skin and you imagine the stories they must have told of the great birds who walked without fear. Of their power, their gentleness. Maybe even their wisdom if birds can be wise. And here's where it gets weirder. You know the roc, the mythical bird that could lift elephants in its talons, mentioned in 1001 Nights. There's a strong chance those tales were inspired by the elephant bird. Travelers and sailors, especially Arab merchants who reached Madagascar, might have seen the eggs or heard locals describe them. Imagine hearing about a bird that lays eggs the size of your torso. Wouldn't you start picturing wings that blot out the sun? Marco Polo wrote about giant birds in Madagascar. So did Ibn Battuta. Of course, historians still argue whether they were describing real animals, distorted memories, or just good old travelers' exaggeration. But the fact remains, the elephant bird laid the groundwork for legends. You lean back on your hands and watch as the imagined fire flickers out. The ancient campsite vanishes like smoke, leaving only moss and silence. It's strange, isn't it, how something so real could become a myth so easily. But that's what happens when the real world starts to vanish. Memory takes over. Stories twist. And soon, a gentle fruit muncher becomes a sky monster, capable of carrying off sailors and smashing ships with its wings. You smile just a little. Poor elephant bird. It didn't ask for all this drama. It just wanted to eat figs and not fall over. You rise and walk again, stepping carefully over roots, and remembering that ancient eggshell still stuck in your pocket-sized imagination. Up ahead, something gleams. At first, you think it's just water, a shallow puddle. But as you approach, you see it's a depression in the earth, circular, ringed with bones. Not elephant bird bones, lemur. Maybe a dozen of them. You freeze. Okay, time to consider another theory. There's some super fringe research, still very much in the we're not sure this is legit category, that suggests elephant birds may have been scavengers. Not predators, no. But not 100% vegetarians either. Did they occasionally peck at, carrion snap up insects, maybe even defend territory from smaller mammals and win? Historians debate this hotly. There's little to no direct evidence, and the idea doesn't totally mesh with the bird's anatomy. But it does raise questions. When you get big enough, sometimes you don't have to be a killer. You just are the danger. You take a step back from the ring of bones. There's no violence here, not really. Just decay. And maybe an echo of a moment when size alone meant dominance. You wonder what the lemurs thought of the elephant birds. Were they indifferent neighbors, nervous cohabitants? Did they steal food from their nests or just share the trees? One thing's clear, Madagascar was a delicate dance of species, a loop of give and take, coexisting in ways no other island could replicate. And like most dances, it only works if no one changes the rhythm. But humans, we don't just change the rhythm. We show up with a new instrument, crank the volume, and say, let's remix this. You shake your head, laugh softly, and brush moss from your pants. You've got more walking to do, and the trail ahead promises even stranger turns. But right now, you carry something important. Not just a glimpse of an egg or the outline of a nesting bird, but the pulse of a lost world beating quietly beneath your feet. You follow the trail as it dips into a sunken valley, the underbrush getting thicker. Vines brush your shoulders. The air's damp clinging to your skin, like whispered secrets. And somewhere in the murmur of the forest, you swear you hear low rustling, slow, steady, rhythmic. Not wind, not rain. Your heart picks up. Of course you remind yourself there are no elephant birds left. But in this place, with your mind half dreaming, anything feels possible. So let's talk about how they disappeared. Picture this, it's around 1,000 years ago, give or take. Madagascar has been settled by humans for a few hundred years already. The first settlers likely came from both Southeast Asia and East Africa. An unlikely duo blending cultures like a culinary fusion restaurant that somehow works. And those early Malagasy communities, they were skilled. Farmers, fishermen, storytellers, builders of boats and small villages. And very importantly, egg collectors. You crouch by a fallen log, brushing away moss. Beneath it lies another fragment of shell. White, porous, as thick as your pinky finger. You imagine someone once finding it just like you did. Maybe they brought it home. Maybe they stared at it for hours. Maybe they cracked it open and made a feast. Here's a juicy detail. One elephant bird egg could feed an entire family. Some estimates say a single egg held the equivalent of 150 chicken eggs. Let that scramble your breakfast routine. But here's where the eggs start becoming a problem. Over time, eggs went from lucky finds to targets. You can't really blame the people. They were surviving, doing what humans do best, adapting, harvesting, thriving. But the birds, not so fast. They laid maybe one egg at a time and only every so often. Think tortoise-level patience but taller, feathery, and not carrying its house on its back. The imbalance was brutal. Eggs vanished faster than they could be laid. And elephant birds, being massive and not particularly fast or bright, let's be honest, didn't adapt quickly. They couldn't fly. They couldn't run away very far. And worst of all, they trusted their old instincts that they were too big to mess with. Historians still argue whether overhunting was the primary cause of extinction, or if it was habitat loss, introduced species, or climate shift. But most agree on one haunting truth. The birds didn't disappear overnight. It was a slow fade, a dwindling, a silence that grew year by year. And here's a heartbreaking tidbit. The last elephant bird may have been seen alive in the 1600s. That's after Shakespeare, after Galileo pointed his telescope at the stars, while Europe was arguing about wigs and the Americas were being mapped by colonizers. These birds might have still been waddling through the Malagasy bush. You step over a root and pause by a tree. Its bark is scored with burn marks, old fire, probably controlled burning slash and burn agriculture, a practice used to clear land for farming, practical, effective, and devastating for large, slow-moving birds whose only defense was blending into the thickets. You breathe deep. There's no fire now, only damp earth and moss. But you imagine the smoke, the crackle, the confused calls of birds as trees fall and ash rises. And somewhere out there, a nesting mother flaps her wings once, twice, and then falls silent. You walk on, following the trail of loss. But extinction isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It happens in the moments when no one's looking. When the last egg doesn't hatch. When the last footprint gets washed away in a storm. When a hunter realizes they haven't seen one of those birds in years and just stops thinking about them. It's the silence that gets you. Of course you say maybe they survived longer than we think. There are local legends, whispers of giant birds, seen long after they were supposed to be gone. One tale tells of a feather, found the size of a banana leaf. Another of tremors in the earth and trees, breaking apart in a line like something huge walked by. But legends, as you know by now, are slippery things. You crest a hill and look out over a wide clearing. It's almost perfectly circular, like something large once nested here and flattened everything within reach. The grass has grown back, but it's a different shade. Softer, older, like it remembers. You lie down in the middle, arms stretched out, face toward the sky. For a moment you pretend you're the last elephant bird. You've wandered farther than you ever have. Your mate is gone. The world is hot in ways it didn't used to be. And you don't quite understand why the trees are vanishing or why your eggs keep going missing. You close your eyes. Somewhere nearby, a river trickles. A real one this time. And in that sound, you hear echoes of wings too wide for today, of footsteps too heavy, of a world that moved too fast for the giants to keep up. You open your eyes and sit up slowly, and here's something to chew on. We only confirmed the scientific extinction of elephant birds in the 1800s, long after they were gone. That's the thing about extinction. You don't always know the moment it happens. It's like realizing someone you used to see every day hasn't shown up in months, and then years, and then never again. You dust yourself off and start walking again, the forest pressing close. You keep expecting to see a flash of feathers in the brush, a round shadow moving through the trees. But no, just wind. And maybe a part of you wants it that way, because if they were still out there, hidden watching, we'd probably mess that up too. You step carefully through the undergrowth, your path narrowing as ancient roots weave underfoot, like the veins of the island itself. Everything feels older here, older than time, older than stories. The light filters through the canopy in speckled patches, gold and green dancing on your arms. The air is thick, but not just with humidity. It's thick with memory. And with that weight on your shoulders, let's take a look at the humans who lived alongside the elephant birds, the early Malagasy, the storytellers, the ones who knew the forest, not from textbooks, but from dreams. They weren't just egg snatchers and fire setters. They were farmers and foragers, yes, but also spiritual people deeply connected to nature. To them, animals were more than just resources, they were symbols, ancestors, spirits. In Malagasy folklore, large birds often appear as omens or guardians. Some tales even suggest that the great birds didn't vanish, they simply slipped into the realm of the sacred. You duck beneath a low branch and hear the screech of a lemur somewhere high above. That at least is a sound the elephant birds would have known. In many villages, oral histories preserve the memory of giant birds for generations. One myth tells of a bird so massive its wing beats stirred storms, its eyes like lanterns glowing in the dark forest. It was said to guard a hidden grove where time moved backward and wounds healed in moments. Children were warned never to follow its call. Here's the curious thing, while some dismissed these as just tales, the consistency of these stories across different regions hints at something more: shared memory maybe, or cultural echoes of something very real. Maybe the people didn't think the elephant bird was gone, because to them it never truly left. You reach a small rise in the path. Below it, you see flat rocks arranged in a circle. It looks like a gathering place. Maybe a fire once burned in the center. You sit on one of the stones, your fingers brushing over its weathered surface. How many stories were told here? How many warnings whispered over flames? Historians still argue whether the people of Madagascar deliberately hunted the elephant bird to extinction, or whether it was a tragic side effect of expanding agriculture and growing population. Some even suggest that the humans and birds may have coexisted peacefully for centuries, each adapting to the other's rhythms until something changed. What changed? Climate, possibly. Shifts in rainfall patterns. Increasing drought. Perhaps new crops brought from afar disrupted native ecosystems. Or maybe, just maybe, the arrival of outsiders sparked a chain reaction. By the 10th century, trade networks were linking Madagascar to Arabia, India, and beyond. These weren't just merchant ships, they were cultural freight trains, bringing new animals, new tools, and new pressures. Rats and dogs introduced to the island likely raided nests. Livestock trampled through feeding grounds. The delicate balance shattered. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the midst of all this, some accounts say that elephant birds could run as fast as 30 miles per hour when startled. That's highway speed. Imagine being overtaken by a blur of feathers and panic the size of a car. One legend even describes a stampede of frightened birds thundering through a village, flattening huts and terrifying livestock. The villagers called it the Day of Wind Feet. You smile at the absurdity, but also you kind of wish you'd seen that. You lean back on the stone. Nearby, something rustles in the leaves. Probably a chameleon. Hopefully. It's hard not to feel the ache of absence here. Elephant birds didn't just disappear, they left holes behind. Ecological ones. With the birds gone, certain plants lost their best seed dispersers. You know those massive hard-shelled fruits that elephants love today. Madagascar had its own versions, and some species likely relied on elephant birds to swallow the fruit whole and pass the seeds far from the parent tree. Without the birds, the trees stopped spreading, forests thinned, balance tipped. You walk again, brushing aside a curtain of vines. A shaft of sunlight pierces through, illuminating something on the ground. Another shell fragment. You kneel. This one's larger than the others. The curvature is striking like the dome of a helmet. You trace its edge. The shell is still thick, still stubborn. Still here, just like the stories. And while you sit there holding this ancient remnant of a life long gone, you realize something else. Extinction isn't just an ecological event. It's cultural. Every time a species vanishes, 1,000 tiny threads snap, threads connecting people to place, to myth, to memory. The early Malagasy may not have known the word extinction, but they felt its sting. When the last bird stopped calling. When children stopped seeing the great footprints in the mud. When the shell fragments stopped turning up in the riverbanks. They buried those losses in story, transformed them into legend, passed them on in lullabies and warnings. You press the shell to your forehead for a moment like an offering. Silly maybe, but it feels right. And you wonder, did the last elephant bird die alone? Or was it seen, honored, mourned? Maybe somewhere deep in the forest, someone left food for it, sang to it, watched it disappear into the mist, and whispered, "Go safely." Because in those stories, extinction isn't a failure, it's a transition. The bird doesn't vanish, it becomes wind, tree, memory. You rise, cradling the shell, and step back onto the path. The trees close behind you, but you feel watched. Not in a creepy way, in a witnessed kind of way. like something very old sees you and approves. And then you hear it, not a roar, not a call, but the rustle of wings. Impossibly wide, impossibly soft. You look up, nothing, of course. But the stories you realize are never nothing. The path curves, narrowing again as thickets press in on both sides. You swipe away a hanging vine and almost trip over a root shaped suspiciously like an ankle grabber. Smooth move explorer. But as you steady yourself, your eyes catch something just ahead, open space. Light. A clearing. You step into it and feel a shift. The temperature cools. The light turns pale. And there, scattered across the clearing like broken pottery, left by a careless giant, are more fragments, eggshell pieces big as saucers, some as long as your forearm. This isn't just a coincidence. You've stumbled into a nesting ground. And that's where we're heading next, into the very heart of where life began for the elephant bird, the nest. Now, when you picture a nest, you probably imagine something small, cozy, and balanced precariously on a branch. Not this time. Elephant bird nests were sprawling ground-based structures more like shallow craters than anything avian. The mothers likely scraped huge hollows into soft earth or sandy soil, surrounded by thick vegetation for camouflage. Each nest held just 1 or 2 eggs, each weighing close to 20 pounds. That's about the size of 150 chicken eggs, give or take a scrambled breakfast. And those shells incredibly thick, up to 4 millimeters. Strong enough to protect against weather clumsy feet, and probably even a curious lemur poking around. But not strong enough to survive us. You crouch beside one of the shell pieces. It glints slightly under your fingers. Think about these elephant bird eggs were so gigantic. A single one could have fed an entire village omelets for days. Historians still argue whether these eggs were a rare delicacy or a dietary staple. Some believe early Malagasy communities collected them only occasionally, honoring their size and rarity. Others argue the eggs were such an easy source of fat and protein that they were hunted to oblivion. It's the ecological equivalent of finding golden hamburgers lying around. How do you not grab one? Quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists have found signs that people poked a hole in the shell to suck the yolk out without cracking the egg entirely. Like a prehistoric juice box. Just picture someone strolling out of the forest, sipping casually from a basketball-sized egg. Nature's protein smoothie. You move farther into the clearing and you notice something strange, burn marks. Not recent. These are ancient scorch patterns on some of the shell fragments. It's possible the nests were deliberately burned to drive off predators or to make the eggs easier to find. Or not predators at all. Us. Fire was a tool. Fire made things simpler. You could find the nest scare of the mother if she didn't already bolt and take the prize. But that makes you wonder how protective was an elephant bird mother. They had size, sure, but these were not aggressive creatures. No claws, no talons, no sharp beaks. Their defense was their bulk, their speed, and their camouflage. When danger came, she may have simply slipped away through the underbrush, her footsteps thudding softly, trusting her nest would remain hidden. Tragic flaw, it didn't. You sit at the center of the clearing where the soil dips slightly. Maybe this exact spot once held a growing chick curled up like a feathered question mark inside its colossal shell. Scientists believe elephant bird hatchlings were precocial-born, fully feathered eyes, open, able to walk almost immediately. No helpless fluffballs here. Within days, that chick could be trotting through the ferns on its own, wobbling on legs as thick as your arms. Still, even the sturdiest hatchling needs help, and that's where things get murky. Historians still argue whether elephant birds raise their young actively like emus or ostriches do, or whether they were more hands-off or wings-off. If they did stick around, then maybe the mother guarded the chick, taught it paths, nudged it away from danger. If not, well, it's a tough world when you're a feathered bowling ball wobbling around without backup. And speaking of feathers, those feathers were likely black, maybe a charcoal gray. Dense, sturdy, more like palm fronds than the fluttery stuff you find on pigeons. Useful for insulation, especially on cool coastal nights. A few fossilized impressions suggest these birds may have had thick plumes, fanning from the base of their tail, giving them a kind of prehistoric bustle. Fashionable and functional. You lie back on the grass and stare at the sky, imagining one of those chicks pushing its way out of the shell. It would take hours, maybe days. A tiny beak chipping from the inside, working stubbornly. The first breath, the first blink, the first awkward, clumsy step. And right there, maybe hidden in the bushes, the mother watching. There's something heartbreakingly beautiful about that idea. That even these giant creatures, so often defined by their size, began their lives fragile, dependent, and now empty shells, burned earth, hints. You sit up again and brush grass off your arms. This nesting ground is silent now. Not even insects buzz. The air feels reverent like a cathedral. The only sounds are the whisper of leaves and the slow crunch of your steps as you move through the clearing. Then, in the distance, something catches your eye. A dark shape at the edge of the trees. You freeze. It doesn't move. It's just there. You walk closer. Not an animal. A sculpture. Or maybe just a rock. But shaped eerily like a sitting bird. A long, bowed neck. The arc of a shoulder. Someone might have carved it centuries ago. Maybe someone who remembered. Someone who missed them. You place your palm on its surface. It's warm from the sun, solid, but it feels hollow in a way. A monument to something lost. You whisper, "I see you," because it feels right, because someone should say it. And then you leave the nest behind. The forest begins to shift around you. Trees change shape, thinner, taller, with leaves whispering above like distant voices. You pass into another biome entirely, and your feet crunch over a carpet of dry needles. This place feels older. Not in years, but in memory. As if even the wind moves more slowly here, careful not to disturb what's buried. And you're not imagining that. You've entered what many believe were once the elephant birds' final strongholds, hidden habitats in remote highland pockets of Madagascar. Their last stand. Not dramatic like a battlefield. No epic battle cry. Just dwindling numbers, shrinking spaces, and the quiet scrape of extinction inching closer. See, for centuries, possibly millennia, elephant birds were spread across much of Madagascar. From humid lowland forests to scrubby southern plains, they thrived. But over time, their range collapsed, shrinking like a puddle in the sun. A mix of climate shifts, deforestation, and the oh-so-persistent actions of people likely forced them into isolated fragments of survivable land. And here's your mainstream fact for tonight. Radiocarbon dating of elephant bird bones shows that their last confirmed remains date to around 1000 to 1200 CE. That's surprisingly recent. While Vikings were sailing and cathedrals were rising in Europe, these giant birds were still pacing quietly through the underbrush in Madagascar, living fossils surrounded by a rapidly changing world. But what's really odd, like conspiracy theory levels of odd, is how long after that people still seem to know about them. Quirky tidbit incoming as late as the 1600s. French and Portuguese sailors told tales of monstrous birds on Madagascar. One account from a French naval officer described a giant ostrich hiding in the misty interior, too large to be real, but too detailed to dismiss. It's the kind of story you'd expect from a guy who just drank seawater for a week. Still, it makes you wonder. Historians still argue whether those reports were based on surviving elephant birds, misidentified ostriches, or just good old-fashioned sailor exaggeration. But one thing's clear, the legend outlasted the creature. You pause at a twisted, sun-bleached tree. Its bark is stripped likely from wind, but a few etchings remain. Maybe natural, maybe not. You wonder if someone once carved symbols here. A memory, a warning. It's strange, isn't it, that we only really start to romanticize something when it's already gone. In these final habitats, the elephant birds were likely ghosts even in their own time. Rare, seldom seen, maybe feared, maybe revered. Some local oral traditions describe sacred birds too powerful to hunt. Others speak of thunderous footsteps shaking the earth. Whether those stories were echoes of truth or pure myth, we'll never know for sure. But let's imagine. You crouch low, peering through the trees. There, between a cluster of ferns, imagine a pair of elephant birds walking slowly in the distance. One adult, one young. The chick follows clumsily, kicking up dust. The mother pauses every few steps, scanning the horizon with those deep-set dark eyes. The world around them is dimmer. Human villages dot the edges of the forest. Dogs bark in the night. Smoke curls from distant fires. The forest shrinks year by year. She knows somehow that the safe paths are vanishing. You follow her footsteps, careful not to break a twig. Because something about this scene feels too delicate to interrupt, too sacred. Here's something weird one theory suggests. The birds may have survived in tiny mountainous pockets long after we thought they were extinct. Some even propose they clung on into the 1700s. There's no hard evidence, but no hard denial either. What there is, however, is silence, a long stretching quiet that nature only gives once something has truly gone. That's what you feel now. You climb a narrow ridge where the air sharpens and cools. Below, valleys unfurl like green paper. The sun slips low. And right there on the edge of the cliff you see it. Not a bird, not a nest, just a bone. A massive femur wedged into the earth like a forgotten staff. Weathered, cracked, but unmistakable. You crouch beside it. Place your hand on the surface. The grooves are wide enough to fit your fingers. This bone once held up an animal taller than you, heavier than your car, and yet gentle enough to lay an egg without breaking it. Weirdly tender for something so big. You stare at it for a while, long enough to forget the time, long enough for the shadows to stretch and swallow the trees. And you think about all the last animals, the last mammoth, the last thylacine, the last dodo, the last elephant bird. No farewell, no audience, just an end. Here's a joke to shake that off. What did the last elephant bird say to the explorer? Absolutely nothing. It was an elephant bird. They were famously not chatty. Okay, not your favorite. Moving on. You descend the ridge slowly, careful with each step. You think about what it means to vanish. How a creature that once thundered through the jungle now exists only in bones, stories, and internet documentaries. And us, we show up at the end of the movie, popcorn in hand, asking what happened to the plot. Still, the forest isn't empty. Madagascar remains a wonderland of life. Lemurs leap through trees. Chameleons blink in 12 colors. But part of you will always be searching for that silent shape in the mist. That deep imprint in the earth. That one last feather curling in the wind. So you keep walking, because there's more to find. Your boots squish into softer ground now as the landscape flattens and spreads into a lowland marsh, brackish, shimmering under the twilight sky. You can almost feel the hum of insects warming up for their nightly orchestra. And beneath that hum, there's another rhythm. Slower, heavier. It pulses under your feet like an echo from centuries ago. You're backtracking now, not in direction, but in story. Tonight, you're trailing the footsteps of one of the strangest partnerships in extinction history, humans and elephant birds. Not exactly best friends. More like reluctant roommates. We've danced around it all night, but now's the time to get real like you're not going to like this part real. Because the story of how elephant birds disappeared is tangled up in our species' greatest hits, fire farming, and the ever-reliable oops, we didn't think that through. Mainstream fact, by the time humans arrived in Madagascar, roughly 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, elephant birds had already been thriving for millions of years. Millions. No natural predators, no real threats. Just big birds doing big bird things. Scratching the earth. Laying comically enormous eggs. Living their best quiet lives. Enter humans. With their flint tools and their curious appetites and their deeply questionable decision-making. You wouldn't think a group of ancient settlers arriving in canoes could change an entire ecosystem. But oh, they could. And they did. Slash and burn agriculture turned lush forests into fields. Domesticated animals like zebu cattle and goats spread disease and trampled nests. Dogs started chasing eggs. Pigs started sniffing out unhatched chicks. And people discovered that a single elephant bird egg could feed an entire village. Here's your quirky tidbit. An elephant bird egg was the size of about 150 chicken eggs. Let that sink in. Imagine making an omelette that needs a forklift. There's even some debate about whether those eggs were eaten raw cooked, or brace yourself, fermented into a kind of prehistoric custard. Historians still argue whether early Malagasy people revered the elephant birds or just saw them as slow-moving, protein-packed targets. Now, if you were hoping for a peaceful coexistence scenario, I have some bad news. These birds were ground dwellers, nesting in open areas and sticking close to feeding routes. That made them incredibly easy to hunt trap or accidentally destroy. One bonfire in the wrong place could wipe out an entire nesting ground. And if you think, well, maybe humans just took a few eggs, not enough to matter, let me offer this gentle reality check. Extinction doesn't need violence, just a slow, steady removal of the next generation. One egg here, two there, year after year. Until one spring, there's nothing left to hatch. The saddest part, it's likely no one realized it was happening until it was too late. That's usually the case with extinction. It's not a sudden crash. It's a long fade. A forgotten nest. A quiet night without footsteps. You pause at the edge of the marsh where reeds part to reveal something strange, a nest. No eggs, of course. Just a ring of darkened soil sunken into the ground. But you swear it still holds warmth. As if something very large once sat here, watching the stars while her eggs rested beneath her. You sit beside it, careful not to disturb the shape. And you think about how we inherit stories without realizing the cost. The elephant bird didn't just vanish, it was unwritten. Erased from living memory by appetite, accident, and indifference. That's why you're here really, to remember. There's a theory, and this one's going to rattle your brain, that ancient Malagasy cultures may have considered the elephant bird sacred, right up until food became scarce. Suddenly, that sacred symbol was Sunday dinner. Is that blasphemous or just survival? Historians still argue whether early settlers were directly responsible for the extinction, or whether environmental changes made the bird's survival impossible no matter what. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But it's a blurry line, one marked by ash feathers and footprints that stop mid-stride. Another joke, because we need it right now. What did the last elephant bird say to the hunter? Can't we talk this over eggs and toast? Okay, that one cracked under pressure. Get it. Back to the marsh. You glance up and catch the glint of stars above. The sky here is vast and clean. No city lights, no planes. Just space. And silence. The kind of silence that wraps around your thoughts and makes you feel very small. In that stillness, you picture the elephant bird again. Not running, not fleeing, just being. A 7-foot-tall giant, feathers shifting in the breeze, eyes calm, grounded. There's a kind of dignity in its simplicity. No war cries, no revenge. Just the quiet certainty of a creature that belonged to its land. And you sit there long enough for the frogs to start calling again, for the wind to pull your hair gently. You sit there long enough to wonder if maybe that bird still walks somewhere. Not in the real world, maybe, but in the leftover warmth of a nest, in the lull between waves, in the deep silence of a forest that remembers. You rise, brush off your knees, and keep walking. The trail pulls you east now toward older ruins, toward stone markings and half-buried clues, toward the places where the last memories of these creatures hide beneath roots and riddles. But for now, the marsh hums behind you. The ghost of a nest slowly fades into shadow. And somewhere out there in a place, maps don't mark a bird that weighed as much as your sofa once took its final steps, without knowing it was the last. The path becomes stonier now, your bare feet crunching softly over scattered pebbles. The air dries out cooler here, laced with whispers of distant wind. You trace your fingers along an ancient boulder etched with faint patterns, spirals, lines, shapes that almost look like feathers. You're entering the realm of ancient memory now. Stone carvings, bone fragments, oral tales, passed down like bedtime stories. This is where we try in all our flawed glory to piece together the last traces of the elephant bird. Not just what it was, but how we remember it. Or misremember it. Let's play a game. Close your eyes and picture a dodo. You probably saw a fat, goofy bird with a clueless expression. Right, now try picturing an elephant bird. Nothing. Maybe just a really big ostrich. That right there is the legacy gap. A bird that once ruled an entire island is now barely a footnote in most textbooks. Ask a classroom to name extinct animals, and they'll give you dinosaurs, mammoths, maybe a saber-toothed cat if someone's watched enough cartoons. But elephant birds, blank stares, crickets, maybe one kid who yells, "Big chicken." Let's fix that. Mainstream historical fact. The official scientific name for the elephant bird is Apiornis maximus. And yes, that Maximus is doing a lot of heavy lifting. We're talking about a bird that could weigh over 1,000 pounds, stand 10 feet tall, and lay eggs big enough to serve breakfast for 20. It's the largest bird to have ever lived, bigger than the tallest ostriches, heavier than the mightiest moas, and yet there's almost nothing left of it. No skeletons posed in museums like dinosaur celebrities. Just a few scattered bones, some cracked eggshells, and an ocean of silence. That's where oral history steps in. See, Madagascar has a rich tradition of storytelling. Songs, chants, folktales whispered by firelight. And nestled in those stories are glimpses, just glimpses of massive birds who once patrolled the forests. They don't call them elephant birds though. That name came much later, a Western invention with flair. Locals had names like Vorompatra, meaning bird of the Amphitrace. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some believe the Vorompatra inspired legends of the roc, a gigantic bird from Arabian mythology said to snatch elephants into the sky. Wild right, a bird so big it could carry an elephant. That's bedtime fuel right there. Historians still argue whether the roc legend was rooted in exaggerated sightings of elephant bird remains or whether it was purely fictional. What's certain is that Marco Polo heard of it. So did Sinbad. And eventually the line between fact and fable blurred until no one was quite sure if the bird was real or just a really dramatic metaphor. You find a feather. Not real, of course. Carved into stone, etched deeply by someone who clearly wanted it to last. It's too large for any local bird, even by prehistoric standards. And beside it, another spiral. You're starting to realize that these spirals scattered everywhere may not be just decorative. They could represent the eggs. A spiral is a shell, a swirl, a promise of life in motion. You crouch there running your fingers over the symbols and wonder how much do we really lose when a species goes extinct. Not just flesh and feathers, not just DNA. We lose the idea of that creature, the way it fit into the world, the sounds it made, the patterns of its migration, the smell of its nesting grounds after rain. Things no fossil can preserve. Things that vanish not just from ecosystems, but from imagination. And that's the real extinction. Here's another little debate that still stirs museum arguments. Did any humans ever see a living elephant bird? We assume yes. But definitive proof, it's slippery. The youngest elephant bird bones date to about 1,000 years ago, maybe 800. But some stories persisted far longer, suggesting the birds were seen more recently, maybe even within the last 400 years. One French governor claimed he saw elephant bird eggs used in villages as water jugs. There's even a sailor's account from the 17th century, describing a great bird of shadow that moved without flight. Vague, spooky, probably exaggerated. But it hints at something we always hope for when a species vanishes, a miracle holdout. Like those cryptid sightings you hear about Loch Ness Bigfoot the thylacine in Tasmania. Deep down, we all want the elephant bird to still be out there, just around the next bend, thumping through the underbrush. You know what? Let's indulge that fantasy for a moment. You close your eyes and listen. You hear the creak of branches, the soft shuffle of something huge and feathered stepping across moss. You feel its presence, not threatening, just there, watching, remembering you as much as you're remembering it. You open your eyes and of course it's just trees. But the feeling lingers like a shadow cast by a moon that's already set. Another joke, sure, why not? What do you call an elephant bird at a masquerade ball? An extraordinary guest. Okay, moving on. As you rise and continue walking, you feel like you're moving through layers of memory, not just layers of time. Each symbol, each scattered bone or whisper of folklore adds another brushstroke to the portrait of this lost giant. It's not a full picture yet, it may never be, but it's enough to know they mattered, that they were, and so were the people who named them, hunted them, sang about them, and carved their feathers into stone. You step forward past the carvings, toward a slope, dotted with fireflies. And above you, the stars shift position. One constellation arcs just right and okay, maybe you're sleep deprived, but it almost looks like a bird, a very large bird, watching you from above. The stars fade slowly as the silver fog settles over the path. It's cooler now, with the kind of hush that makes you instinctively lower your voice. Even though you're the only one here, you step carefully through ankle-high grass, still dewy, still whispering secrets. And just ahead, jutting from the soil like ribs from a buried titan are more bones. Bigger this time, definitely bird bones. Your fingers brush over the ridges of a massive femur, the size of a small log, sun-bleached and slightly cracked. It's easy to forget you're walking through a graveyard. An entire species tucked beneath the earth, scattered like forgotten treasure. Tonight, you're not just here to mourn the elephant bird. You're here to investigate the crime scene. Because make no mistake, this was a murder. Mainstream historical fact. The elephant bird went extinct roughly 1,000 years ago, and that timing suspiciously overlaps with the arrival of humans on Madagascar. The coincidence is, well, not much of a coincidence at all. We humans have a bit of a track record when it comes to feathered giants. Ask the moas of New Zealand, or the great auk, or if you have a time machine handy, the poor dodo. Here's what the fossil record shows. Before humans arrived on Madagascar sometime around 2,000 to 2,500 years ago, the island's megafauna thrived. Giant lemurs, enormous tortoises, crocodiles the size of sedans, and of course the elephant bird. Then we showed up, and things started to disappear. Now, before we sharpen the pitchforks against our ancient ancestors, let's consider context. Early humans weren't villains in a cartoon. They were trying to survive in a brand new environment filled with unfamiliar dangers, limited resources, and a whole lot of big tasty animals just walking around. Open scholarly debate. Researchers still argue whether humans hunted the elephant bird to extinction directly, or whether it was a combination of hunting habitat destruction and maybe even climate change. Some studies point to slash and burn agriculture damaging nesting grounds. Others focus on egg harvesting, since even one elephant bird egg could feed an entire village. Let's talk about the eggs for a second. A single Apiornis egg could be over a foot long with a capacity of more than 2 gallons. That's 150 chicken eggs in one shell. Think of it as the prehistoric version of a Costco family pack. You crack one open and boom, omelets for a week. Quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found eggshells with burn marks on them, like someone tried to cook them. Or maybe just got tired of trying to crack one open and lit the whole thing on fire out of frustration. Relatable. There are even accounts from 19th century explorers finding fragments of these eggs being used as bowls, ladles, or ritual objects. One British naturalist reportedly saw an egg turned into a hat. Practical, sure. Dignified, not so much. Still, it's worth noting that the extinction didn't happen overnight. The elephant birds were resilient. For centuries after human arrival, they still roamed Madagascar, laying their comically oversized eggs and leaving their massive footprints in the soil. But eventually, their numbers dwindled. You imagine it now, one of the last elephant birds, perhaps a mother, nesting alone in a thinned-out forest. Her clutch of eggs hidden beneath ferns, warmed by the morning sun. And nearby, someone creeping through the underbrush, clutching a spear or maybe just a big rock. No malice, just hunger. The bird bolts. The eggs are taken. The cycle repeats. Until it doesn't, and the forest goes quiet. What's eerie about this place? The place you're imagining is how little evidence remains. No ivory towers of fossils. No clear this was the last one date. Just scattered bones, eroded memories, and the lingering question, how did we let this happen? You pause. A breeze curls past your ear. If guilt had a temperature, this would be it. To lighten the mood, Why did the elephant bird cross the road? It didn't, because humans burned the forest down before it got the chance. Okay, that one's dark. Let's say, to lay an egg that blocked traffic for a week. Better, back to the trail. As you move deeper into the valley, the trees grow taller. Their bark is scratched with marks, some natural, some maybe not. You wonder if ancient humans left signs here, tracking the birds' movements. There are no journals, no GoPro footage, just speculative archaeology and educated guesses. And still, we try. We build models, reconstruct habitats, analyze pollen samples from lakebeds to guess what the forest looked like before we started clearing it. We simulate extinction timelines and run computer models to estimate population collapse. It's all incredibly impressive and profoundly sad. Because at the heart of every study, every hypothesis, every paper, is one uncomfortable truth: they're gone because of us. And not just the elephant bird. By the time Madagascar's megafauna had vanished, over a dozen major species were lost. Giant lemurs with sloth-like claws, hippo-sized tortoises, giant fossa, and ancient predator, all swept away in a few hundred years. You sit down beside another fragment of bone, this one hollow and slightly curved, maybe part of a wing. You gently tap it and hear a soft echo, like the island is whispering back to you. A final thought before you move on: extinction doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like nothing, like silence, like a nest that never gets filled again. But you're not done yet. There's still more to find, more stories buried beneath layers of dust and fern and time. You rise, brushing your hands off on your pants. The sun is rising now, and you squint toward the horizon. You can almost see the silhouettes of what once was flocks of slow-moving giants, their heavy footsteps pressing stories into the earth. And so you follow. You follow the fading bird prints, not literal ones, of course, but those ghostly imprints your imagination keeps laying down over the earth. Each step feels heavier now, not because of the terrain, but because of the sheer gravity of what's been lost. Still, you press on. The path narrows into a kind of natural hallway boxed in by fern-covered cliffs. The light here is dim, with streaks of gold slanting in from cracks above. You half expect to find cave paintings, perhaps a red ochre depiction of an enormous bird standing tall beside a human figure, spear raised mid-gesture. No such luck. These walls are silent. But that doesn't mean they're empty, because this next part of the story doesn't take place thousands of years ago. Nope. We're hopping forward. Fast forward button pressed. We're talking about rediscovery, mainstream historical fact. In the mid-1800s, the Western scientific world was first introduced to the elephant bird when French explorer Alfred Grandidier brought fossilized remains and fragments of eggshell back to Europe. Scientists were stunned. It was like someone had handed them a dinosaur egg, except from a species that had existed alarmingly recently. It rattled them a bit, because until then, this giant bird was little more than rumor. Local Malagasy legends spoke of a massive creature, the Borompatra, the bird of the Ampatres. These stories were often brushed aside as myth. You know, tall tales told over fires to make children behave. And then suddenly, evidence. Real tangible crack it open and measure it evidence. And not just any bones, skulls, beaks, even entire femurs that dwarfed any known ostrich. It was like finding a Yeti skeleton stuffed under your bed, a myth-made material. Scientists began to piece together its size, diet, and probable habits. And as more bones were unearthed, a clearer picture emerged. This wasn't just a giant chicken. It was one of the most massive birds that ever lived. And it had vanished without us even noticing. Open scholarly debate. There's still some academic squabbling over just how recently the elephant bird walked the earth. Some argue extinction happened around 1,000 years ago. Others think it might have survived in remote pockets up until the 1600s or even later. One disputed but intriguing clue. A French explorer in 1658 reportedly described seeing giant eggs in native possession eggs, too large to come from anything living today. Were they leftovers or fresh? Nobody knows. But if the latter were true, it means the last elephant birds lived during Shakespeare's lifetime. They may have shuffled through the forest while Galileo pointed his telescope skyward. The Renaissance above, and a relic below. Quirky tidbit: when British paleontologist Richard Owen examined one of the first elephant bird bones, he reportedly mistook it for a dinosaur fossil. Can't entirely blame him. The thing looked prehistoric. The idea that it had belonged to a recently extinct bird was at the time a mind-bender. You picture Owen hunched over a massive thigh bone monocle, slipping, muttering something like, "Well, that's not a turkey." The rediscovery of the elephant bird also sparked a minor egg craze in European museums. Everyone wanted one. Explorers returned to Madagascar with checklists and shovels. Shell fragments became collectibles. Some eggs were even reassembled from dozens of pieces like prehistoric puzzles. To this day, a complete Epiornis egg can fetch tens of thousands of dollars at auction. If you're saving up for one, maybe just get a Fabergé instead. You reach a clearing now. The forest gives way to flat scrubland, and in the center stands a tall plinth of stone. It's not real, not in the world you're walking through, but it's real enough in your head. This is where you pause. This is the memory monument. You imagine it rising above the earth, carved with the silhouette of a massive bird, wings tucked at its sides, neck, long eyes blank but somehow still kind. Around the base are etched names not of individual birds, but of the people who helped rediscover them. Grandidier, Owen, Milne Edwards, modern Malagasy scientists too, names you may never have heard but whose hands piece together the truth, bone by bone. And below that, a question. Why did we forget them for so long? It's one of the weirder parts of the story. You'd think something this enormous would have left a bigger memory imprint, but in many Western histories, the elephant bird only popped into awareness when its skeletons did. Entire centuries passed without anyone wondering what giant had left those titanic eggshells in Malagasy sands. Maybe we weren't ready to ask the right questions. Or maybe we were too busy telling ourselves that extinction was a thing of the past, something that happened to dinosaurs, not to animals walking around in human times. Well, surprise! Extinction doesn't check a calendar. You step off the imaginary plinth and into the low sunlight. The air smells dry, now tinged with the dusty breath of scrub plants and crumbling rock. Somewhere a bird calls. A small one. A modern one. You smile, but not without a flicker of loss. The chorus that once echoed across Madagascar's plains, it's quieter now. Much quieter. Still, not all is gone. Museums still hold bones and shells lovingly labeled dusted weekly by interns who probably wonder how anything could lay an egg that big. Scientists continue to study DNA pulled from fragments, hoping to learn more about diet lifespan, maybe even vocalizations. There's even been chatter, admittedly free in science, about using recovered DNA to recreate the elephant bird. Jurassic Park style. Clone it, hatch it, raise it in some giant aviary and marvel. as it pecks gently at breakfast bananas. Do we have the tech? Maybe. Should we do it? That's the real question. Because once you resurrect something, you have to keep it alive. No logging its habitat. No harvesting its eggs. No pretending it's a curiosity in a glass cage. You'd have to protect it, really protect it. That kind of responsibility is heavier than any fossil. You kneel running your hand over a fallen tree branch that looks suspiciously like an old weathered tibia. The difference is subtle, but you know. You always know now. And just like that, the path pulls you forward again. Not to mourn, but to learn, to remember, to stay awake a little longer. You drift through the scrubland like a shadow. No footsteps, no sound, just the memory of movement. As if you're walking alongside the bones of history itself. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear a low hum. The kind of hum that hovers between fact and possibility. Because this next stretch of your journey, it's all about those eggs. The ones bigger than your head. The ones that made even scientists tilt back in disbelief and mutter, "No way!" Oh, but yes way. Mainstream historical fact, elephant bird eggs were the largest eggs ever laid by any animal in recorded history. Some measured over 13 inches long and could hold more than 2 gallons of liquid. That's the equivalent of around 150 chicken eggs. Basically, you could scramble one and feed your entire apartment building twice. And what's wild is that these eggs weren't some prehistoric leftover from the Jurassic era. No, these giants were being laid while humans were already building cities and scribbling poems. And in Madagascar, it wasn't rare to find eggshell fragments scattered across the land like nature's broken porcelain. Some locals used the shells as bowls, spoons, even makeshift flasks. You pass a cluster of those fragments now sun-bleached, freckled with time, lying half-buried in the earth, like forgotten puzzle pieces. You imagine someone, maybe a child, holding up a chunk of shell and trying to picture the creature that laid it. Would they feel pride, fear, or maybe just awe? Quirky tidbit scientists discovered that some elephant bird eggs, when emptied and cleaned, could still hold water without leaking. After 1,000 years in the ground. Talk about sturdy design. Nature doesn't skimp when it builds giants. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The way these eggs became cultural artifacts. You might think of museums and laboratories, sure. But long before that, these eggs were part of Madagascar stories, whispered in fireside legends and ceremonial rites. Some elders claimed that breaking an uncracked egg would bring misfortune. Others believed that holding a piece could protect you from evil spirits. And then there were the traders. By the 19th century, elephant bird eggs were highly prized curiosities among European collectors. Some were sold for vast sums carried carefully across oceans in straw-lined crates like precious jewels. One specimen even made its way to the British Museum, where a very dignified curator reportedly fainted upon seeing it for the first time. You can't confirm that last part, but honestly, it wouldn't surprise you. Open scholarly debate. Scientists are still chewing over one peculiar question. How many eggs did an elephant bird lay in its lifetime? Was it like a modern ostrich producing dozens each year? Or more like the kiwi, which lays a massive single egg and then calls it a day? Some researchers suggest these birds may have laid only a handful in a lifetime, making each one incredibly valuable to their survival. If true, then losing even a few to predators or say curious humans would have had a devastating impact on population. And speaking of predators, here comes the real twist in the egg story. Because it wasn't just humans gathering these eggs for tools or trade. They also ate them. Yep, Imagine cracking open one of those beastly things over a fire pit and serving up the world's largest omelette. For early Malagasy people, it must have felt like striking edible gold. One egg could feed a whole village. But with great eggs come great consequences. You imagine a scene, a group of settlers stumbling across a freshly laid egg in the wild. They whisper, glance around, then carefully lift it, trying not to crack it. Maybe they plan to share it. Or maybe greedily they argue over who gets more. Either way, the egg disappears. And somewhere in the forest, a towering, shaggy mother bird returns to an empty nest. The first time it happens, maybe she squawks. The second time, maybe she waits. The third, she stops laying altogether. That's the danger of slow breeders. Elephant birds weren't like rabbits pumping out babies every season. They were slow, deliberate, ancient creatures who invested deeply in each offspring. And when humans started snatching up their eggs, well, that's all it took. Just a few generations of hungry hands. You pause, looking down at the imaginary nest. Beside you, a circle of dry brush, broken reeds, and a crater where an egg once sat. It's quiet here, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that reminds you what's missing. And yet those eggs, they still hold a strange kind of magic. In modern times, collectors go to absurd lengths to find even fragments. A full, intact egg. That's the Holy Grail. Some even light them from within, like lanterns, the curved shadow of the embryo's past, flickering against the shell. It feels eerie, like waking a ghost. But there's another side too, a more hopeful one. Because these eggs, while symbols of extinction, are also keys. Inside their mineralized shells, scientists can sometimes recover fragments of DNA, tiny blueprints of what once was. Maybe not enough to clone a full bird. Not yet, but enough to understand its relatives, its diet, its path. You trail your fingers over a low rock that's smooth and egg-shaped and imagine the potential locked inside a single shell. The genetic code of a lost world frozen in time. What stories would it tell if we could hear it speak? You keep walking, and as the landscape changes scrub giving way to coastal breeze, you realize something else. You're not just following a trail of bones and eggshells. You're following breadcrumbs of responsibility. Every cracked egg in the sand reminds you that even the smallest choices, what to take, what to leave behind, can change the fate of a species. You reach a bluff now, looking out over Madagascar's western shore. Below, the sea laps against stone. You imagine elephant birds once stood here too, their massive shadows stretching over the tide. And one last thought lingers before you move on. Somewhere right now in a glass case or dusty drawer, an egg still rests, still whole, still waiting. Not for hatching, but for remembering. You leave the shoreline behind the scent of salt still clinging to your clothes and wander back inland following no trail, only instinct. The grass shifts beneath your feet, tall and whispering, as if the land itself is trying to tell you something. And it is. It's telling you to look closer, not just at the bones or the eggs or the birds, but at the people who lived among them. The humans who shaped and ultimately reshaped this delicate balance. This is where the story starts to get messy and human and hard to ignore. Mainstream historical fact. The first humans arrived in Madagascar somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 years ago. They came by boat, likely from Southeast Asia and Africa, bringing with them crops, animals, and fire. And as they settled, they encountered a landscape bursting with strange creatures, giant lemurs, massive tortoises, and yes, elephant birds stomping around like feathery tanks. At first, it must have felt like paradise, fruit overhead, easy prey underfoot. But humans, as we tend to do, left a mark. Now picture it. You're one of those early settlers. You've never seen a bird like this before. Taller than a camel, stronger than an ox. It doesn't fly, doesn't even run. Just watches you with one glassy eye while you build your thatch hut nearby. You probably don't even know the word extinction. You're just thinking about dinner. And that's how it begins. Open scholarly debate. Researchers are still arguing over exactly how quickly the elephant birds declined after humans arrived. Some suggest a slow fade, stretched out over centuries. Others propose a much faster collapse as little as 200 years from first contact to final breath. That's barely 8 generations, a blink. But here's what most scientists agree on: the birds didn't vanish naturally. They didn't dwindle due to climate. They were hunted, their eggs were taken, and their forests were burned. Quirky tidbit: some ancient tools made of elephant bird bones have been found alongside early human settlements. Imagine trying to carve a spoon or a spear shaft out of a femur as thick as a fence post. That's either genius or desperation, maybe both. You kneel by a half-buried fire ring. Now charred stones and fossilized wood forming a dark circle in the grass. Someone cooked here once. Maybe they roasted fruit. Maybe they boiled water. Maybe, just maybe, they cracked open an egg, the size of a toddler, and shared it with their tribe. The smell of smoke clings to the past. You can almost taste it. But this isn't just a tale of bad humans, poor birds. It's more complicated than that. Because early Madagascar societies weren't cartoon villains. They didn't have fossil records or carbon dating. They were just people adapting, surviving, making choices with the knowledge they had. And those choices had consequences. As populations grew, trees were cleared for farming. Fires raged through brushland. And with each patch of forest, lost the elephant birds, lost food, shelter, and safe places to lay their eggs. The land that once echoed with heavy footfalls grew quieter and emptier. You climb a small ridge and look out over a deforested plain, imaginary now, but all too real then. What was once thick jungle is now open grass, the kind that feeds cattle but not giants. You picture the last elephant birds here, tall and watchful, staring down the future. One mother lays an egg. It's her final one. She guards it fiercely, warding off curious dogs and hungry hands. But one night while she's away, someone finds it. A boy maybe. Or a traveler. He means no harm. He just wants a warm meal. So he takes it. The bird never lays again. And just like that, a thread snaps. There's something quietly tragic about how unceremonious extinction often is. It's not always fire and fury. Sometimes it's just one egg, one tree, one missed chance, multiplied 1,000 times. Of course, some try to resist. Oral traditions speak of creatures too sacred to harm. Some clans may have forbidden hunting elephant birds entirely. But taboos can be broken. And sacred doesn't always mean safe. You pass a grove of ancient palms, now twisting, leaning like elderly guardians. One tree has a hollow and inside sits a stone carving. It's crude, simple, but it shows a bird, towering proud. Next to it, a human figure bows. Respect maybe, or guilt. Here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. Some scientists believe that the extinction of Madagascar's megafauna, including elephant birds, was one of the earliest examples of human-driven ecological collapse on a massive scale. Long before industry, long before global warming. Just a few thousand people with fire tools and hunger. And here's the kicker, it's still happening today. Not with elephant birds, no, but with rhinos, with orangutans, with coral reefs. The tools have changed, but the pattern Not so much. That realization sticks with you as you walk on. Because if humans could wipe out a bird that big, that powerful with nothing but basic tools and open flame, what are we doing now with all our tech and toys? The grass rustles behind you. You turn, half expecting to see just a flicker of feathers in the dusk. But there's nothing. Just silence. The kind that presses in around you like the world itself is holding its breath. And maybe it is, because every species lost echoes through time, through ecosystems, through memory. And the elephant bird, it left a deep echo. You feel it in your feet now, a faint phantom vibration, a memory of footsteps that once shook this land. It's not there, not really, but your mind fills in the gaps. And for just a moment, you walk beside it again. Two shadows, one fading, one remembering. The trail shifts, now winding through sparse grasslands, toward scattered rocks that look like someone dropped them here on purpose. You run your hand across one smooth, warm, sun-baked. But there's something about it. The shape, the symmetry. And then it hits you. It's not just a rock. It's an old egg fragment. Not from a chicken or duck. One of those eggs. The kind that once held an elephant bird embryo. Snug and silent like a giant sleeping secret. Even broken, the shell is thicker than your thumbnail. You could knock on it like a door. You do softly and pretend it might answer back. Mainstream historical fact, elephant bird eggs are the largest bird eggs ever known, over 30 centimeters long, holding about 9 liters of fluid. That's the equivalent of 7 ostrich eggs or 150 chicken eggs. You'd need a salad bowl just to hold the yolk. If you scrambled it, you could feed your whole neighborhood twice. But here's where it gets stranger. Some of those eggs unbelievably still exist. Not the gooey raw kind, those are long gone. But preserved shells, fossils, and even intact eggs that never hatched. Some sit in museums, others tucked away in private collections, hidden like treasure. One was even found floating in the sea in the 1800s. That's not a metaphor. A nearly complete elephant bird egg was fished out of the Indian Ocean. No one's sure how it survived the journey, or if it was buried somewhere nearby and washed away by flood. Historians still argue whether it was a genuine remnant or some elaborate collector's hoax. You crouch now, brushing more dirt away from the fossilized fragment beneath you. There's a surprising satisfaction in cleaning something that old. The layers of time flake off like pastry crust. And as you work, you picture the last of these eggs being laid not in a nest, but maybe in a panic in a thinning forest under a smoky sky. Quirky tidbit: some European collectors in the 19th century were obsessed with elephant bird eggs. They'd trade them for fortunes, naming them after queens and emperors. One egg, sealed flawless, was treated like a royal heirloom, displayed in a velvet-lined box like it was the Holy Grail. It still exists today, locked in a glass case in London, guarded by lasers and velvet ropes. It's just an egg. But somehow it's also everything. You wonder what would happen if one hatched today. Not in a lab, just spontaneously, Jurassic Park style. A baby elephant bird blinking in the modern world. Imagine the confusion, the TikToks, the headlines. Prehistoric pigeon saurus, born in Madagascar. You'd watch it grow in real time. See it stomp across an airport tarmac, graze in someone's backyard, scare a few tourists. But no, that's not how time works. Once broken, an egg can't be reassembled. Not really. Still, scientists dream of resurrection. There's that word again, de-extinction. Open scholarly debate. Some biologists today are seriously debating whether we should try to bring back the elephant bird or something close. Using preserved DNA gene editing and a bit of creativity, you could theoretically take an ostrich embryo and tweak it into a neo-elephant bird. Not an exact match, but a cousin, a remix. But is that science or hubris? Some argue it's a distraction, a techno-fantasy better left in movies. Others say it could restore balance, bring back lost seed dispersers, heal ecosystems damaged by human hands. One researcher even called it environmental atonement. Still, there's a reason we cradle eggs so gently. They symbolize hope, but also fragility. And if we crack the past once, what makes us think we won't do it again? You lift a fragment and hold it to the sun. It catches the light just right, turning translucent like stained glass. For a moment, you think you see the outline of something curled inside. A spine, a feather. But it's just a trick of shadow and age. Still, you imagine the chick that could have been. Big feet, wide eyes, fluffy head, wandering into the world on legs too large for its thoughts. It wouldn't understand fences, or highways, or humans with smartphones. It would just want to live. And now that you've handled this ancient shell, this cradle of memory, you feel a strange urge to protect what's left, not just of the elephant bird, but everything like it. The forgotten, the endangered, the hanging on by a thread species that don't get headlines or hashtags. Because once this island thundered with giants, now it's quiet. And the only sound left is your breath echoing back off the wind. You tuck the shell piece into your satchel, not to steal it, just to carry it a bit longer, like a pebble of borrowed time. A reminder that even the biggest birds begin as something small, breakable, dependent. And when you stand again, you notice something nearby. A circle of tiny depressions in the ground like footprints, but spaced too far apart for anything small. Too deliberate to be erosion. They stretch into the brush like someone was walking alongside you, just a little earlier. Were they? Did one bird really outlast the rest? A straggler? A ghost? You take a step toward the brush. The grass parts. Just whine. But you're not alone here. Not really. Because the elephant birds may be gone, but their eggs, their echoes, those are still with you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to keep walking. You step off the beaten path and into a thicket of twisted baobab trees, their giant, swollen trunks resembling ancient bottles left behind by some prehistoric party. The air here is thick with the scent of earth and sap, sweet and sharp. You can almost hear the faint pulse of life, a rhythm matching the slow, steady heartbeat of the island itself. Baobabs aren't just trees. They're survivors. They've watched the rise and fall of species, including our feathered giants. You brush your fingers along the rough bark, imagining elephant birds nesting somewhere in the branches or at their bases. Because here in Madagascar, life found a way to carry on even after the elephant birds vanished. Mainstream historical fact: baobab trees can live for over 1,000 years, making them some of the oldest living organisms on Earth. Their massive trunks store water to survive droughts, providing critical resources for countless animals and humans alike. They might have been silent witnesses to the elephant bird's final days. It's wild to think that these trees, looking almost alien with their bulbous shapes, could be standing roots, sunk deep from before the elephant birds even disappeared. A living memory. Open scholarly debate. Some ecologists debate whether baobabs and elephant birds had a symbiotic relationship. Did the birds help spread baobab seeds, or were they just passing through? Without elephant birds, baobab regeneration might have slowed, but other animals stepped in. It's a puzzle that's still pieced together with a lot of guesswork and a little hope. You push deeper into the grove and find a strange sight, a cluster of large round hollows at the base of one baobab. At first, you think they're termite nests, but the shape and size are off. Closer inspection reveals fossilized eggshell fragments embedded in the soil. The unmistakable thickness, the curve, it screams. Elephant bird, nesting site, quirky tidbit. Malagasy folklore is rich with stories about the elephant bird, locally called vorombe, meaning big bird. One tale says the bird's call could shake the earth, while another warns that stealing its egg brings curses. Some elders even claim to hear the distant booming footsteps of the birds on quiet nights. A ghostly heartbeat beneath the baobabs. You pause, letting the legends wash over you like a warm breeze. It's easy to dismiss these as superstition. But on an island where the impossible once lived, maybe the stories hold a grain of truth. Maybe their memories passed down like seeds. The baobab grove feels alive in a way the rest of the island doesn't. It hums with resilience, whispers of secrets kept safe by bark and leaf. And you sense that even though the elephant birds are gone, their spirit lingers here in the trees, in the soil, and in the stories. You settle beneath one baobab and lean your back against its thick trunk, feeling the coolness seep into your skin. Time seems to stretch. The island breathes slowly as if inviting you to rest, to reflect on the fragile dance of extinction and survival. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether human agriculture and fire practices directly caused the baobab's population changes, or if natural climate cycles played a bigger role. The truth is probably somewhere in between a tangled web of cause and effect, much like the story of the elephant birds themselves. As twilight deepens, you close your eyes and imagine what the island might have looked like centuries ago. Dense jungle canopies, towering elephant birds wandering beneath baobabs, standing tall as silent sentinels. The air thick with the calls of creatures both lost and living. A slight breeze rustles the leaves above you, and you wonder if the island is reminding you to listen carefully, to remember that extinction isn't just about what disappears, but also what endures. Sometimes survival means changing shape, adapting routes. You rise, stretching, and as you walk away, you take one last look at the baobabs. Their silhouettes against the fading light are both eerie and beautiful, like giant guardians, watching over a land still healing from its ancient wounds. You can almost swear you hear a soft, distant thud, like a heavy footfall from a bird too big for the world. Or maybe that's just the wind. Either way, you keep moving. You continue walking until the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. The air cools, and the chorus of nocturnal creatures rises around you. Crickets, frogs, and somewhere deep in the distance, an owl hoots. You find yourself near a small village, where the lights twinkle faintly through the trees, and the faint smell of cooking fires mingles with the night air. You pause to listen and learn a bit about the human history intertwined with the elephant birds. Because as you might guess, people played a big part in the story, not just as observers, but as active players. Mainstream historical fact: humans arrived in Madagascar around 2,000 years ago, and the timing roughly matches the decline of the elephant birds. Early settlers hunted these giant birds for food and likely disrupted their habitats with fire and farming, contributing to their eventual extinction. It's a classic tale of humans meeting megafauna and megafauna losing. But there's more to the story than just hunting. Some anthropologists suggest elephant birds were also culturally important, appearing in rituals and stories, even possibly revered. Quirky tidbit: there's a story from Malagasy folklore about the Epiornis, the elephant bird being so huge and powerful that it could stomp out fires and shake the earth. One tale tells of a hunter who dared to steal an elephant bird egg and was cursed with endless bad luck, which supposedly still haunts his descendants today. You might think that's just a tall tale, but locals swear these legends hold a grain of truth. You imagine the first settlers stepping off their boats encountering these enormous birds for the first time. You probably wouldn't survive that meeting unless you were quick on your feet or carrying some serious spears. After all, these birds weren't your average chickens. They weighed up to 700 kilograms, that's roughly the size of a small car, and stood over 3 meters tall. Open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the main cause of extinction was direct hunting or habitat destruction. Some suggest climate changes around that time also played a big role, making it a combination of factors rather than a single culprit. You sit near a flickering campfire with a local storyteller, listening to their version of the elephant bird saga. They speak softly, almost reverently, about how these birds once ruled the island. There's pride mixed with sadness, an acknowledgement of loss, but also a hope for remembrance. You realize that extinction stories aren't just about the animals. They're about the people left behind to remember them. The way we tell these stories shapes how we think about nature responsibility and the future. You stand and watch the fire's embers drift upward, glowing like tiny stars. You wonder, what will people tell their children about today's lost species? Will the stories sound like cautionary tales? Or will they be myths of a time before humans learned to live in balance? As you walk away from the village, the night deepens and the sky fills with stars. You glance up, imagining a giant silhouette against that starry sky. An elephant bird soaring, not in flesh, but in memory. And somewhere in the distance, the owl's call echoes again, a soft reminder that the past is never really gone. You follow a narrow, rocky path, leading up a gentle hill. The stars, now your only light. The moon hangs low and full, casting a silver glow over the land. The night smells cooler here, fresher with hints of salt from the nearby ocean breeze. You pause to catch your breath and take in the view, stretching coastlines, swaying palms, and the dense forest curling inland like a green sea. It's here on these windswept coasts that you find traces of a surprising connection between elephant birds and another lost giant, the giant lemurs. Madagascar's story isn't just about one extinct species, but a whole cast of characters, each with their own unique quirks. Mainstream historical fact: Madagascar was once home to giant lemurs, some the size of modern gorillas, that coexisted with elephant birds. These giant lemurs disappeared roughly around the same time humans arrived, facing similar pressures from hunting and habitat changes. Together, they shape the island's ecology in ways we're only beginning to understand. You crouch beside a large weathered bone, partially buried in sand, maybe from a giant lemur or a massive bird. It's too eroded to be sure, but it connects you to the island's banished giants. You imagine a world where lemurs the size of your couch leapt through these trees and elephant birds stalked the undergrowth. Quirky tidbit: some scientists speculate that elephant birds and giant lemurs might have had a bizarre form of ecological teamwork. The giant lemurs climbed high into trees, shaking down fruits, while the elephant birds waited on the ground to gobble up what fell. It's like an ancient fruit delivery system, powered by two very different beasts. If that's true, their extinction was a double whammy for the island's forests. Open scholarly debate. Researchers still argue about the exact timing and causes of these extinctions. Some say that climate shifts caused the forests to shrink before humans arrived, making the giants vulnerable. Others emphasize human hunting as the final blow. Probably it's a complex story with many threads. You pause to listen, the night suddenly quieter, as if the island itself is holding its breath. Somewhere in the dark, you hear a faint rustle, maybe a small lemur still surviving in the shadows, reminding you that life persists even after giants fall. As you continue along the ridge, you think about Madagascar's isolation. It's a natural laboratory where evolution took wild detours, creating animals found nowhere else. The elephant bird was just one of many extraordinary experiments nature conducted here. You reach the hilltop and gaze out. The ocean stretches infinitely dark and mysterious. You wonder if any other lost species still swim beneath those waves, silent and unseen. Quirky aside, local fishermen sometimes tell tales of giant sea creatures, ghost whales or massive turtles, so old they remember when the elephant birds roamed. Most scientists shrug these off as myths, but then again, stranger things have been discovered in the deep. You take a deep breath, letting the salty air fill your lungs. The island feels ancient, alive with stories. You're just one more voice in the long chorus of memory and myth. And as the wind cools your skin, you realize that every step you take is a step through time, retracing the footprints of creatures both enormous and fragile. You turn away from the view, ready to descend back into the dark forests, carrying the whispers of giants with you. You find yourself wandering into the heart of Madagascar's humid rainforest, where towering trees drip with moss and vines twist like ancient ropes. The air here is thick and heavy with the buzz of insects and the sweet, sticky smell of ripe fruit hanging overhead. Light filters down in scattered beams, casting patchy shadows that dance as you move. In this dense jungle, you imagine the elephant birds making their way through the underbrush, their heavy steps muffled by thick layers of leaves and soil. Their massive bodies would have pressed down the foliage, leaving trails in their wake paths, now reclaimed by creeping plants and busy ants. Mainstream historical fact: elephant birds were flightless, relying on their size and strength to navigate the forest floor. Their legs were powerful, built to carry their massive bulk, and they likely fed on fallen fruit seeds and plants found on the ground. They played a crucial role in seed dispersal, helping to maintain the health and diversity of Madagascar's forests. Quirky tidbit: recent studies suggest elephant birds might have been surprisingly quick on their feet for their size, capable of short bursts of speed that could reach up to 30 km/h, about 18 mph. So much for slow and clumsy giants. You probably wouldn't want to race one unless you're training for a marathon. Open scholarly debate. Scientists still argue about how elephant birds reproduced and raised their young. Were they solitary nesters or did they gather in colonies like some modern birds? Did males or females incubate the giant eggs? These questions remain partly mysteries, their answers hidden in fossilized nests and eggshell fragments. You come across a patch of ground littered with massive eggshell shards. Their thickness and size are staggering, some fragments as big as your hand. The largest intact eggs discovered were roughly the size of a basketball, holding the potential for chicks that weighed up to 10 kilograms at birth. That's like a toddler emerging fully formed, ready to grow into a behemoth. Quirky aside, elephant bird eggs were so large they were used as water containers by early humans. Imagine filling a basketball-sized egg with water and carrying it around like a prehistoric water bottle. Talk about eco-friendly. You run your fingers over a fragment, feeling the rough texture, imagining the fragile life that once curled within. The fragile beauty contrasts sharply with the bird's bulk, a reminder of nature's delicate balance. In the distance, a faint rustle catches your attention. You imagine a small chameleon or a tiny frog darting between leaves, survivors of the same world that once supported these giants. It's humbling to think that while some creatures vanish, others adapt and endure. As you continue your walk, you think about the ripple effects of losing a species like the elephant bird. Without these giant seed dispersers, certain trees may have struggled to propagate, altering forest composition over centuries. The forest you walk through today is a living testament to loss and change. You breathe in the damp earth and listen to the symphony of the jungle bird calls, insect buzzes, the rustling of leaves. It's a vibrant, chaotic orchestra, playing on long after the elephant bird's final notes have faded. You find a quiet spot and sit, letting the jungle's hum settle around you. Tonight, the ghosts of giants are not just stories, but part of the living landscape, their shadows flickering just beyond the reach of the moonlight. You tread softly now, the forest thinning out as the dawn begins to creep over the horizon. The first rays of sunlight spill gold through the trees, warming your face and stirring the birds to song. The air shifts, fresh and cool, carrying a promise of a new day, and with it the quiet persistence of life after loss. This final stretch of your journey brings you to a place where the past and present merge. An open clearing dotted with wildflowers and ancient stones. Maybe the remnants of a long-forgotten human camp, or a natural resting spot for elephant birds. You settle down here, feeling the earth beneath you pulse with the slow heartbeat of time. Mainstream historical fact: the elephant bird's extinction, while tragic, sparked a wave of scientific curiosity that continues today. Fossils and eggshell fragments have helped paleontologists piece together their story, turning Madagascar into a key site for understanding island extinctions and human impact on ecosystems. Quirky tidbit: one of the elephant bird's closest living relatives isn't a bird at all, but the kiwi of New Zealand. Despite their size differences, genetic studies reveal surprising connections. So next time you think of the tiny shy kiwi, remember it's a distant cousin of these giants. Family reunions must have been awkward. Open scholarly debate. Some researchers suggest that elephant birds might not be completely gone. There are occasional tantalizing reports from remote locals claiming to have glimpsed huge mysterious birds in the dense forests. Phantoms or folklore? Most scientists remain skeptical, but the idea lingers like a whispered secret in the wind. You close your eyes and breathe deeply, the sounds of the forest enveloping you, birdsong, rustling leaves, the distant crash of waves. It's a symphony of survival and memory, echoing the giant footsteps now long vanished. You think back to the massive eggs, the towering figures, the lush forests, and the humans who changed everything. You realize the story isn't just about what was lost, but about what remains, the lessons etched in bones, the tales whispered through generations, and the wild world still turning, waiting for you to notice. As the light grows stronger, you stand feeling the warmth fill your chest. You are part of this story, now a witness, a storyteller, a keeper of memory. And as you walk away from the clearing, The elephant birds seem to fade into the morning mist, their legacy imprinted in the land, the legends, and your own heartbeat. Now, as you settle in and let your eyes grow heavy, imagine the soft rustling of leaves and the gentle breeze carrying the scent of distant flowers. The world slows around you, the sharp edges of reality softening into a calm haze. The echoes of giant footsteps fade into the quiet pulse of the earth beneath your skin, a reminder that all life moves in cycles, beginnings and endings, blending into one another. You feel the weight of history gently lift, replaced by the steady rhythm of your own breath, slow and steady. The stories of the elephant birds, their colossal eggs, and the vast forests are now part of you, quiet companions in the gentle dark. They remind you of the fragile beauty of the world and the enduring strength in every whispered tale. So let your mind drift softly like a feather on a breeze, carried by the hum of night and the promise of dreams. Tomorrow holds new stories, new wonders. But for now, rest in this peaceful moment, cradled by the memory of giants, long gone but never forgotten. Sleep well.